Good morning, lovelies. Today I'm doing a video about watching my hair dry. By the beginning of this video it's wet, by the end it's probably going to be dry. That's the magic of video. No, so for those who don't know, I'm currently opening a restaurant in Kigali in Rwanda. And I've been documenting it in videos, and I've realised that there's two parts to this. There's the videos of the property where we're decorating and we're gardening and we're doing it all up, so there are those videos. And then there's the admin side of things, which are slightly less kind of visual, I guess, but possibly quite informative if you're thinking about opening a business in Rwanda, because I hadn't done that for over a decade, and things have changed a lot since I last opened a company, and there are a lot of new things and online portals and procedures that you have to do that I am now doing for the first time, and I'm taking you along for the ride so that you can see. Now, the last admin video that I did was about registering my business with RDB, which is Rwanda Development Board. And let's just say, it took a while. We encountered a few little hiccups along the way. You can go and watch that video if you think it will be of use. Today, I'm going to talk about opening a bank account in Rwanda, a business bank account. Because basically once you've registered your business, you're going to need a business bank account. And again, I hadn't done this for many, many years. Over my entire time in Rwanda, I've been through a few banks. I've seen a few things. I've been with Bank of Kigali, or BK. I have been with GT Bank. I have been with Access Bank. I have been with INM Bank. And this one that I'm going to talk about today is I've just opened a business account with BPR, Bank Populaire de Rwanda, I think it is. That's not good. You should know the name of your bank, really. Bank Populaire de Rwanda, I think. Rwanda, de Rwanda, don't know. So I'm going to talk you through that because for me, it was difficult. When I went to RDB, I went to RDB twice in person, and the second time it took me 2 hours to get through the process that I needed to get through with somebody face to face. This took 4.5 hours. Some of it was my fault. Some of it I didn't take what I needed. In fact, a lot of it I didn't take what I needed because I didn't know what I needed. And some of it was just absolutely treacle slow customer service and, you know, queuing systems that just didn't really work. So I'm going to take you beginning to end my process on that day. Now, Bank Populaire, I was kind of well disposed towards them because just something silly that stuck in my mind is, you know, when they brought in ATM charges, because originally ATMs, I think they were kind of free. I mean, same as the UK. Once upon a time, ATMs for taking cash out were free, believe it or not. And I am old enough to remember that. And then, of course, banks realised that they could charge a service fee, which makes the banks money. And that came in here in Rwanda. So I actually remember Rwanda before we had ATMs. When I first got here 20 odd years ago, there were no ATMs. And then they came in, and now like the charges just keep going up and up and up and up and up and up. And I always remember BPR because they used to have a little ATM near my favourite petrol station, my favourite convenience store, which has gone now, sadly. But the two things I always remembered about it was that for a very, very long time, they didn't charge. Which, you know, even when all the other ATMs were like charging 3,000, 4,000 francs to withdraw any money, they didn't. And the other one was that it was the only ATM you could go to, and when you take cash out, it would dispense it in small notes and large notes. So the largest note you can get here is a 5,000, and it would give you 5,000s, but it would also give you small change like 1,000s and 2,000s, which were insanely useful because it's quite hard to get change sometimes. So I felt quite well disposed towards BPR. You know, it's quite difficult here because there are certain banks, like I think HSBC, I'm not sure if Lloyds, but certain big name banks that you would recognise in sort of, especially the UK, they have them in Kenya, we don't have them here. So definitely when I first arrived, there was no bank in Rwanda, the name of which I recognised. So you're always kind of rolling the dice when you sign up. And here as well, you get transaction fees on everything. I might do a different video about kind of comparing British banking and Rwandan banking, like what you get as a customer and what you expect. But it's quite a long and detailed discussion, so I'll leave that for another time if anybody's interested. If you're interested, let me know. But yeah, so basically, it's difficult to find a bank that is easy to use. You usually get fees for all transactions. Often you get charged for using internet banking. And another thing with BPR is I don't think they do that. I think the online banking is free, which is beautiful and lovely, and as it should be. Most banks are going to charge you for using online access, using all sorts of different services, some of which you probably don't need. Anyway, long story. Moving on. So I was already headed towards BPR, but then I was talking to some people and everybody over and over says INM Bank. Now I had a bad experience with INM Bank a few years ago. I transferred some money over there just to try out one of their accounts because everybody said how good it was. And then I got stuck in this absolutely mad login loop, so I couldn't access the online banking. It was like one of those screen captures where you had to identify pictures of ducks, and all anybody remembers from that period in banking history is that INM Bank, you have to be really good at identifying pictures of ducks. Even when I got all the ducks in a row, it still wouldn't let me into my online banking, so I immediately closed. I think I was with them for like a week, and I just went, I'm not dealing with this, and I left again. But everybody says they've fixed that problem, and everybody says, oh, INM Bank's really good. So I thought I would go and open an INM Bank account. And so this is where the day begins. The day begins with me going to INM Bank. I get on my bike. I didn't film the ride because I didn't think this was going to turn into a whole thing. I didn't film the ride. Drove to INM Bank. Now INM Bank, I often joke, it looks like the Iron Bank from Game of Thrones. It's like really imposing, like this big building in town with this curved roof. Everybody loves the building. I mean, it's very identifiable, and it's quite unusual in Kigali. So I drove over there, I arrived, and I went to drive into, they've got a big underground car park. And the guard came up to me, he took one look at me and my bike, and he said, no, you're on a motorbike, you're not allowed to park here. I was like, what? He said, no, you can't park here. I'm like, but I'm planning to be a customer here. You know, this is customer car parking. Why can't I park here? And he said, no, we don't allow motorbikes. I was like, what? So he sent me over to another car park, like over the other side of the building. I get there and I have talked over and over and over again about there is no sensible car parking for motorbikes in this city. Like, they are just considered as third-class transport, and anywhere you go, you just get put into these corralled into these little groups where everybody's bikes on top of each other and they're having to move other bikes out the way to get them in and out. Literally, it was a space like that, and there were already 3 bikes in it, and I couldn't park there. And the guards going, the word that everybody uses, it's this phrase, no problem. It's like, oh, you can park, no problem, no problem. Yes, it's a problem. Yes, it's a problem that there's no car parking. And I'm not going to leave my bike there for other people to move and shift around when I'm not there to supervise. You know, it's a heavy bike, people can drop it. I don't want that happening. So I went and parked down the far end of the car park, and I walked all the way back to INM Bank. I walked in, I asked, where's the business? You know, I'd like to open a business account. Where do I go? They showed me to this little office. I went in there and I had to say 4 times, I'd like to open a business account. And the lady, I totally get accents are problematic. They can be very problematic. And I just said, you know, very clearly, you know, can I open a business account? And she didn't understand, and I wasn't sure how to explain it in Kinyarwanda. I tried again, can I open a business account? 4 times I repeated that question, and she just like, and I'm standing in the business department, in the place where everybody goes to open a business account. And it's difficult because I don't want to pile on people for language, because absolutely it's a problem. We're in a country with 5 official languages: English, French, Kinyarwanda, Swahili, 4 official languages. And so people have got a mixture of everything going on. But I was as clear as I could be. Can I open a business account? That's pretty much the only thing people are going to go to the business department to do. And yes, it's my fault because I don't speak Kinyarwanda. I'm not fluent in Kinyarwanda, even close. Mbuga Kinyarwanda Ngiche, I'm not even close to it. And yeah, so there was instantly a massive communication problem for something that was quite a straightforward, quite a predictable thing to want to do in a business department. And at that point, I just thought, I already didn't really feel great about I&M after the whole duck incident. So I just thought, I'm done. The parking as well. There was no way I was going to bank with a bank that has nowhere for me to park and treats me like that just because I drive a motorbike. I'm like, no, I'm out of here. I'm outsy. So I checked my phone and I realised BPR was literally just around the corner, like 2 seconds away. So I drove around there. Similar problem with the parking is you drive down and they've got like about 2 feet of space for about 10 motorbikes. But at least there was somewhere to park your motorbike. So I did that and I went upstairs and I went in, and it actually began quite well. I was quite well disposed towards them. I was quite impressed in the beginning because I went to reception. I said, hi, I'd like to open a bank account, a business bank account. And the lady, she immediately said, do you have your RDB registration certificate? And I said, yes. I brought all my paperwork with me. I was very proud of myself. I said, yes, I've got it. And she said, can I see it? And I said, yeah, sure. And I gave it to her. And this is the point. This is the point when she looked at it and she said, it's the wrong one. She said there are 2 that you should have, and one of them is your full certificate of registration. Now, what had happened was, if you want, you can go and watch that other video about RDB. When I finally got registered at RDB after a very uphill struggle, I asked them to print the business registration certificate so that I could go and open a bank account. And that's when I later realised they have 2 certificates. One is your general certificate of registration, the other is your full certificate. They look kind of identical, and they only printed out the general one. They didn't print out the one that I needed to open a bank account in Kigali. So I only found that out when I got to the bank, and hats off, that lady was really good. She offered to look at it. She said, can I see it? And I said yes. And she told me before it went any further, before I sat in a queue for 2 hours, before I walked around 3 departments in the building, she told me, wrong one. So I got back on my bike, drove back home, printed off the certificate, drove back into town, and I got back there and I said, here we go. And she said, yep, that's the right one. And then I said, so do I need anything else to, do the paperwork, process it? And she sort of thought for a moment. She said, passport photos. And I went, okay, is there somewhere in the building I can get a passport photo? And she said, no. And I said, where can I get a passport photo? Okay, so this time the document was correct, but now we're going for a little walk through town to find somebody who can take passport photographs, because they don't have any ability to take passport photographs inside a building where every application requires a passport photograph. I mean, what can you do? Wow. So I first got there at 10:30 in the morning. By 12:20 I was back there with my photographs and my certificate, and I was ready to go. So there were a whole load of things that I started to notice about the bank then when I got into doing the paperwork and things. Before you can go and see anybody, you're supposed to use the customer service ticket machine in the corner. And there is no sign, nothing there at all to tell you this is a ticket machine, take a ticket. When you finally figure it out, it looks quite straightforward. Like, do you want customer service? Do you want a teller? Do you want, business banking? I don't know. They've got like 4 options. And the moment that you click one of those, like customer service, you've then got like, you've got like a list of about 6, 7, 8 different options. And you're looking at going, I don't know. I just want to go and talk to somebody. So you actually need to call over somebody to help you to find the option that you need to find help. It's a lot. And so that happened. Anyway, there was a lot of waiting around. There was a lot of printing of tickets, and the tannoy that was calling out the ticket numbers wasn't that loud. And of course, people are sitting there for a really long time. So most of them are on their mobile phones, watching videos, playing music. In Rwanda, people don't use headphones. It's like, you can pick up a cheap pair of headphones for like a few £1,000. Nobody uses it. I mean, literally, people will just sit in public spaces, blasting music, blasting videos. It's quite a thing. And whilst all of that's going on, because people are, understandably a bit bored sitting and waiting, so you really can't hear the numbers coming out. And it also doesn't call out what's actually on your ticket. So it might say like A004, but you'll hear A4 rather than A004, which isn't a big difference on paper, but when you're listening out for specific numbers in a noisy environment, it's hard to hear. And like the numbers, it was one of those things, you take like a ticket. It was like Beetlejuice, sitting in that waiting room. You take like a ticket and you realise like you're like 10, 12, 20 people down the list. And also there's absolutely no number display. So if you can't hear it, or, if you've got hearing problems, or, you're deaf or anything like that, there's no way that you'd know which number was being called, because there's no display monitor. You have to be able to hear what's being said. And even for me, I have good hearing. With all the noise going on, it was hard. But eventually, I got my banking app set up. So they registered the business, they said, yes, it's open. And they set me up on the banking app, which was fantastic. Logged into the banking app, business name had been spelt wrong. And this also, attention to detail is a massive thing in Rwanda. You need to have it because a lot of people don't. It is insanely common that you will go to open a bank account, you will go to register a business, you will go to do something, and they will spell your name wrong or the business name wrong, even when it's in front of somebody. Is you can give somebody your ID card or your passport, and it's printed there in front, and it will still be wrong once it's entered into the system. And it happens, I'd say, about 8 times out of 10. So whenever you go to get something done, you must always, always, always check very carefully that everything is spelt correctly, because it can lead to massive problems down the line if your passport says one thing, but your business details say a different thing, or your bank account has something different on it. You need to double check before you get up and leave the desk, because once you leave the desk, it's another customer ticket and it's another half hour, 40 minutes to see somebody again. So just make certain. So I had to go back and I had to say, no, you spelt it wrong. And they updated it and it was done properly, and that was all good. And I also noticed that, whilst I was sitting in the office having my business name updated, I'm going to say it was a bit disturbing, because there were piles and piles of bank applications all over the table, with photographs of the person, the names of their businesses, their contact telephone numbers, emails, just lying sprawled across the desk. And this is another thing, is data privacy and data protection is still a very new concept. And it's very, very common. I haven't needed it for many years, but even the Ministry of Justice you used to apply for a criminal records check, and when you went to collect your criminal records check, you walk into this room with just boxes and piles of applications everywhere. You could see anybody's information. You know, there was no protection at all. You could just look at somebody's, and also your own application is going to end up on a desk just like that at some point. People can glance down, you know, see who you are, see what you look like, see what your contact is. It's almost unthinkable that that is the case, but that's the case in banks and in public institutions. Very common to find yourself sitting in a room surrounded by a whole pile of private data. So just checking my notes about what else was going on. So yeah, when I was in there waiting to get my name corrected, I had a customer service ticket for another guy that I was supposed to go back and see, and of course I didn't hear the number go past because I was in this office. So I came out and I'd missed it by one. And so I had to sit and wait, and there were no chairs. Like when I came in first thing in the morning, if you're going to go banking, BPR, get there in the morning, because it was absolutely empty when I first got there. There was nobody. But then around lunchtime, everybody piles in to get banking done. And there was like one strip of chairs, about 5 or 6 chairs, and a huge space behind those chairs where you could have put more chairs, but they didn't put more chairs. There was nothing there. So I literally found myself sitting on the floor of the bank because there was no seating. And you know, it wasn't like to put more seating in would have completely cramped up the building. There was plenty of space. But yeah, I just found myself sitting on the floor, like waiting, which was a bit weird. And then the desk that I was being called to was empty. So I went up just to say, hi, you know, I've missed my ticket by one, can I sit down? And the lady who had originally been really, really helpful and told me about the whole, you need the other business registration certificate, she said, oh, you know, no, go to the person next to me. And I went to the person next to her, who was already seeing somebody, and she said, no, go to the person that you've just come from. And I'm like, but she told me to come here. And so I sat there for about 15 minutes, maybe 20, and you know, this meeting was still going on. All this time, the other lady, there was nobody in front of her. She was just sitting there playing on her phone. I was like, and eventually, after about 15 minutes, I stood up and said, excuse me, can we get this done? And she said, oh yeah, sit down. So we could always have done it at that desk. She just made me go and sit somewhere else for 15 minutes doing nothing. So the reason that I was sitting there trying to talk to somebody is because now that my account was open, I needed to order a bank card and a checkbook. So in order to do that, I had to deposit some money into my account so that they could withdraw the money from my account to pay for the card and the checkbook. And I was just sitting there. I was sitting there for blooming ages, absolutely blooming ages. I thought RDB was a lot. This was a lot. And so she said, well, what you need to do now is, when I finally got to talk to somebody, she said, go outside to the ATM, withdraw this amount of money, come back in, take a customer service ticket, go and pay it in at the teller. I'd been there for about over 3 hours at this point, just trying to get like a business account open. Literally open the business account, get card, get checkbook. That's all I needed to do, and I've been going for about 3 hours at this point. So I went outside, got the money, came back in, and she tried to fast track me to the teller. She gave me a ticket that would apparently be called next. I sat down. 15, 20 minutes later, nobody had called me. There was nobody at the desk she said I was supposed to go to, and nobody ever came back. And the lady sitting next to me, she was so lovely. She had a ticket, she dropped her ticket, and I picked it up for her. And, you know, we just exchanged a couple of words. And about 10 minutes later, she lost the will to live. And she actually had to leave. She was just like, I'm going now. And so she gave me her ticket, hoping that I'd get called up. And her ticket was like, I don't know, I can't remember what it was. It was 50 something. And when they called, I was still like 5 numbers behind the one that I was holding. So at that point, I just lost my mind, because I realised I would be there until closing time trying to get my account open. So I stood up. I went back to the branch manager, who was the guy who had opened up my banking app on my phone and, you know, corrected the name after it was the wrong one. And I sat down with him and I said, can you help me? Because I've been here for about 3.5 hours now and I need to leave today. And I said, what I need is I need to deposit this money into my account, and then I need to order a bank account and a checkbook. And by this point, I was losing my sanity a little bit, because the vast majority of those 3.5 hours have been spent either walking around town and going home to try to get the paperwork that I needed, which, fair enough, was partly on me. That wasn't entirely the bank's fault. In fact, it really wasn't the bank's fault, but it was annoying nonetheless. But after that, the vast majority of my day had been spent sitting there waiting for somebody to talk to me, you know, for a desk to be empty. And I felt most of that time like the ticket machine wasn't moving anybody forward, anybody. And I felt very much like we were kind of being ignored by staff. Like I said, that lady was just on her phone. Like, she could have solved my problem in a few minutes, and she was just like, no, she's just sitting on my phone whilst I'm sitting there waiting there, doing nothing 3 hours into my ordeal. And so by the time I got back to the manager, I was fraying at the edges. I was fraying. And I went a bit Karen on him. I took out my phone. I started the timer on my phone. I put it down and I said, look, you know, I need to leave. I said, I've been trying to pay in this money for over like half an hour now, and all I need is my card and my checkbook. And I said, if you can do all of this for me in the next 20 minutes, I will stay with the bank. And if you cannot do it, I will close my account and I'm leaving. Because I was sitting there thinking, you know, if it's this hard to open an account, what the hell is it going to be like as a customer here? It's like, oh my Christ on a bike. And he had it all done in 10 minutes, all of it. He paid in the money, ordered the card, everything done in 10 minutes. And it could always have been done in 10 minutes. But instead I spent about 3 hours sitting in that bloody bank trying to get to the one person who would actually do something. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, you don't have to imagine, I lived through it. I barely lived through it. But yeah, I know, I don't mean to sound dramatic and but who the hell? By the time I got out of there, it was 10:30, 11:30, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30. It was over 4 hours and 20 minutes by the time I left. So I arrived at 10:30 in the morning, went through all the processes, and I left at 2:50 in the afternoon. That's how long it took me to open a business bank account. I mean, it was busy in there, but it wasn't like crazy busy. It shouldn't have been that slow. It really shouldn't have been that slow. And so I have to admit, I still have my account, and I've got now my checkbook and my bank account. They printed that within about 3-4 days. But I have to say, I'm entering this with extreme trepidation because, as I mentioned before, I've been through so many banks in Kigali. And I'm just going to run you down because, like I said, I've been to the major ones: BK, I&M Bank, GT Bank, Access, and this one. And I'm going to say there's only one of them that I would rate. And just very quickly, just to tell you, BK was the first bank I ever had when I first ever got here, and it was the first one that I really went back to when I moved back to open my business, because Bank of Kigali is the biggest bank in the country. It's the one that's really well known, international sort of banking. You know, that's the one that most people, foreigners, will bank with when they come here. I've never rated their customer service. I've never enjoyed it. And the day that I lost it entirely is I went in there to open online banking, and it's like there's an entrance here and an entrance over here. And I came into the entrance over here. I said, I'd like to, you know, set up online banking. And she said, oh yeah, go up to the 3rd or the 4th floor. I went up to the correct floor. And they said, no, actually you need to go down to the other reception, the entrance on the other side, because I can't remember what it is. I needed to get a piece of paper or something. I went up there, went down to the other one, and they said, oh no, actually you need to go to the other reception. So literally I did a triangle. And when I got back to that first desk, same thing, I just stood there and I was like, what is going on? And then they set me up with online banking, and they wrote down my password and my login details with a biro on a post-it note, and that was how official it was. And I couldn't at that point. I was like, I can't deal with this. I went to the customer service room, and this lady, she spent 10 minutes on her phone, didn't even acknowledge that I was there. It was like, I've always had very low opinion of Bank of Kigali's customer service, but that was over 10 years. That's like 12 years ago now. I went from BK to GT. Now apparently I think GT Bank is something connected with Europe. I'm not entirely sure. Some people had said that they'd heard of it before. I hadn't. It was a new bank to me. GT Bank, I went there because a long time ago, it's not there anymore, but by the Gorilla Roundabout and City Hall in town, they used to have a little office near the petrol station, and you went in and it was beautiful. You walked in, beautiful wooden counters, never anybody in there. And so every time I banked there, I just walked straight in and I was seen immediately, and I didn't have to, pull that kind of foreign privilege, Mzungu privilege thing of going up to the VIP banking desk. I could just walk into the normal front area and get seen immediately. The staff were polite, it was pleasant, it was a good place to be, it was a nice bank, it was stress-free. And the reason I left them is I had a bit of a hissy fit, because once upon a time online banking was free in Rwanda, as it should be. It's like a basic service that every bank should have. And GT Bank suddenly started charging 2,000 francs a month for online banking, and now every bank charges for online banking. But that was the first time it had come in, and I wasn't having it. I wasn't going to pay 2,000 francs every bloody month just to access online banking. And so I left them, even though I had quite a nice account manager there, and it was a really nice place. That is the only bank in hindsight that I can recommend. Is if it wasn't for them bringing in the online banking fee, I probably would have stayed. But I was like, how much per month? What, every month just for online banking, like basic stuff? So yeah, that's the only one. If I'd known that every other bank was suddenly going to introduce online banking fees, I probably would have stuck with them. But I thought it was just them at the time. So yeah, that's the only one that I had a fairly good experience of, but they shattered that. Because I can't remember when I went to GT Bank. I feel like it was something like 2016, I'd have to look it up. But scariest thing of all is they spam me constantly. Like every week I get like a dozen bloody emails from them. And even back in 2021, I was contacting them saying, look, I haven't been a customer with you for years. I haven't been your customer for years. Please stop spamming me. And they don't, and there's nothing I can do. I've tried contacting GT Bank over and over again to stop sending me messages. I am not a GT Bank customer, but my personal contact information, my details are on their database, and they refuse to remove it. They either refuse or they don't know how. Either of those is scary. So GT Bank I would not recommend now, because you will never get away from their continuous spamming, and you cannot remove your data from them. And somebody the other day said, well, maybe they never closed your account. Possible. I have nothing in writing that shows that they did. The other bank that I was with, INM, I told you about the whole duck issue. The duck issue and the parking issue. So I would not bank with INM. Just personally for me, I didn't enjoy any of that. So other people have had really good experiences with an INM. So maybe that's a good one. Just to go and check it out, see how you feel. For me, it was not right. The one that I have been with by far for the longest time was Access Bank, and it was only this year I closed down all my accounts with them. I took all the money out because I only stayed with Access Bank because I'd never had a better experience anywhere else. I mean, all of the banks here are, it takes a minute. And so I stuck with Access because there's car parking there. They're easy to find. But over the years, I have had so many horror stories with that bank. Like, they once took a double payment and then they could never find where the payment had gone to. And then I think it took something like, it took weeks, if not months, to get that money back. I had to claw my money back after a double payment. Every time I went into their customer service area, you'd hear somebody else complaining about something else. Basically, the straw that broke my back, the online banking is just, oh my goodness, it looks like a website somebody created in the early 90s. And I made a payment to somebody, a very important payment. This is the straw that broke the camel's back, and the online banking system said the payment was made. It even gave me the little receipt. Payment is made, it said. And then a few days later, the person I was sending the money to came at me saying, look, you haven't paid. Where's my money? It hasn't been, hadn't gone through. And I contacted the bank and they went, oh yeah, it's a problem with the system. I was like, that's it? It's a problem with the system? That's it? I mean, that is a business ending scenario. You think you've paid your bills and it hasn't gone through. And that, I was just like dumbfounded by how bad the online banking system was, and dumbfounded by the customer service response. And, that's just one example. But over the years, many examples like this. I was losing my mind at customer service on a regular basis, to the point where I just stopped banking as much as possible because I didn't want to have to interact with my bank. They just, my goodness me, they just woof. And again, we've got this same scenario where I finally did close down all of my bank accounts, and I took my money out. They closed down one account in front of me and I saw on the screen it was closed. And the second one, she said, oh, we can't do it now. It's going to take a few hours to close your account. And I said, I made her promise that she would WhatsApp me confirmation, a screenshot confirmation that my bank account was closed. She never did. Of course she never did. Which is predictable. But so, as with GT Bank, I've got no physical written proof. I mean, what bank doesn't issue a written confirmation that your bank account is closed? So businesses and bank accounts are both, you have to jump through a lot of hoops to close them, which obviously is something to consider before opening one. If you're going to open a business, it could be quite hard to deregister it. It's quite easy to make a business dormant, but to actually close it is not. And same with bank accounts, closing a bank account. Now, there is this kind of conspiracy theory idea floating around that businesses and bank accounts don't get deregistered because it looks better on paper to show that there are a lot of bank accounts and that there are a lot of businesses registered, even if maybe they're not active. And it's better to have them on paper than to actually allow them to close and look like there are fewer. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what people postulate, that maybe that has something to do with it. But I don't know. It's one of two things. It's either that, or maybe people just don't know how to close down accounts and businesses. Maybe all of the training is focused on how to set up a business or a bank account quickly and make that easy for businesses, but nobody ever considers that it should be just as easy to close things down legally as well. So I don't know, but all you need to know is that if you are going to open a bank account, you are going to open a business, it's probably going to be with you for life. So yes, Access Bank was my nemesis. It was my least favourite of all of the banks, and it was the one that I was with for the longest. And now we're on to BPR because, it's like Pokemon, you've got to catch them all. Just try every one of them until you can find something that you like. There are a couple more left to go. I think there's EcoBank. I don't know, there's probably another couple I haven't tried. Over the years, I will probably get round all of them. But it's not easy. It's not trouble-free. It's definitely not stress-free. So, you know, I have now got my bank account open. It did take me 4.5 hours to do that. Mostly just sitting on the floor, sitting on a chair, sitting on a swivel chair. That was 4.5 hours. I do now have my bank card. I do now have my checkbook. I need now to, when we've finished the renovations, I need to get a POS machine, so a card machine. And I also need to go to MTN Centre in Nyiritarama, because here people make payments by something called mobile money. Mobile money is like you use your phone as a wallet and you can send money from one phone to another or from one phone to a bank account. And a lot of people pay by mobile money, but in order to do that, your business needs a mobile money code, a business code, and I need to go to MTN to get that, and they need to link it to my bank account. So, done. Those are the two big ones: registering your business and opening a bank account. And once that's done, hopefully, you know, hopefully the rest of the paperwork is going to be a bit easier. That's the administrative side of it over, and hopefully now, oh my God, I don't know where I put it. My coffee cup is behind me somewhere. Where's my coffee cup? Oh. My coffee's gone cold. I've been yapping, my coffee's gone cold. Coffee grinds. Anyway, so yes, those have been the two grumpy posts, RDB, bank account, the two grumpy posts. All I'm going to say is whatever you set out to do in a day, like in the UK, Europe, you're probably used to having like a list of things that you're going to get through in one day. So you might have like 5 or 6 different things you need to do, like go to the bank, go to the post office, go to business registration, go to Labour Department. You might have 5 or 6 things on your list. All I'm going to tell you now is do one thing a day. Do one thing a day, because it's going to take you a lot longer than you expect. Like you're going to go in thinking, oh, it's going to take me like what, half an hour at the most. It's going to take you 3 to 4 hours. And by the end of that, you're going to need to go and have a coffee and a sit down and a sort of a decompress. So just schedule one thing a day. If you get through it, amazing. Then you can move on to the next. But don't set out with a big to-do list, because that's a quick way to hit burnout. Just, you know, one thing at a time, and expect it to take half a day to a day to get what you need to do accomplished. It will get done, it will, but you need to be prepared to take it gently for your own sake as much as everybody else's sake and the people that you're interacting with. Just, you know, just breathe. But it is doable. And yes, so everything's set up now for that, and we can go back to the fun part of painting and decorating.